okay, I'm doing this book and I'm trying to get recordings of people's memories because the oral history is so interesting. We have this great archive, and so if you would, dear friend, I would like you to come up here just for a minute or two, and have a seat here, and I want to ask you a few questions because we have a tape recorder running, and I'm going to ask you a few questions about your experience of Murshid Sam, and just how you met him, and how you, what he was for you. So this is, what spiritual name did Murshid give you?
Tariq.
Tariq, which means the spiritual path. The one whose essence is the spiritual path, or travels the spiritual path. So tell us a little bit, if you will, about how you met Sam and what you were. Yeah, please do. No, we're going to do this the right way. You can put it down. You put it down. See, when Sam wore this, he was very short. He wouldn't wear anything underneath it. He got the shorts on, It was slit at the side, so with their arms, you can bring your arms.
This is what it was like meeting Sam.
Yeah, and you got it on inside out, which is perfect. So if you will, please, in your own way.
Beloved, with these words inspire.
Speak loudly.
That was part of meeting Sam.
Losing our hearing.
Oh. I had many things in common with Sam. We both came from wealthy families. We both were a bit square pegs trying to fit in round holes. I was born awake. I had this wonderful parade of divine beings and spiritual beings happening in my bedroom. Got recognized or tried to get fit into one of those round holes when I was 6, being recognized as a reincarnation of a Buddhist. I didn't want to play. You talked about the heart being a container without boundaries. To say I'm a Lama or to say Sam was a Sufi or a Zen master was like walking up to the ocean and holding a little cup of water against the ocean. I was 15 years old when I met Sam. Amazing. I had gone to San Francisco to meet Suzuki Roshi. I wanted to meet this guy. I had started traveling when I was 12. My parents were wealthy. They would let me travel to India. They had friends in San Francisco who would supervise me a little bit, as much as I let them. And I heard about Sam, and I had scheduled to, this was in, I think, the middle of July in 1967. And I had, it's not easy for me to remember, forgive me.
It was the summer of love.
It was. Hippies were happening. And Haight-Ashbury was a lively place. And I went to his house across from a park.
Yeah, where I live, yeah, now.
Yeah.
The Minter Garden, yeah.
Yeah. My birthday is August 28th. And I remember, well, anyway, I was supposed to fly back to Minneapolis where I was born. And I'd heard about Sam. So I went, I want to meet Sam. So it was late, fairly late at night. And my friends, this man and woman drove me to where Sam's house was. I knocked on the door in the middle of the night. That's what I'd heard Tariq had something to do with, being a messenger who comes in the middle of the night and knocks on your door. Here I'm this sort of, I don't know, I had had quite a difficult year the year before. I wasn't deeply appreciating being in a physical form, and my friends accused me of wanting to kind of commit samadhi, and I was sitting for many, many hours a day, and a woman in Minneapolis who was a wonderful medium in the spiritualist church, Bertie, really helped save me. She acted as an instrument of the beloved to really help me deeply appreciate being in a physical body and how precious life is. And so here I'm this kid, and I'm knocking on Sam's door, and he opens the door, and I'd had all these wonderful experiences since birth, but it was the first moment I felt my heart. And we kind of just didn't say anything. We just melted into each other. Cosmic consciousness, whatever you want to call it. Which is quite different than I'd had the experience of sitting with Suzuki Roshi. I know it's very appropriate to have it speak about Sam in such a way that he's honoring his teachers, but I felt in that moment Sam was really born with that juice. He was awake. He was on fire, and we stood in the doorway. And I was kind of, one of my teachers when I was very young had told me a story about a man who was walking toward the sunrise. And in his shadow, all these miracles were happening, but he didn't even know that. He was just toward the one. And I took that very to heart, because my past lives, I had some problems a little bit with pride. And so I'd always kind of been very yin, like the moon, like in the shadow. I'm still like that a lot. I recently met Wali again. Wow, you have to meet more than every 40 years. And thanks so much to this brother Hafiz, who, when I came to Eugene, ended up living across the street. And there was a point at the Northwest Sufi camp where I really, the less I wanted people to give me any attention, the more it seemed to come. And there was a point when I was like, I just want to run away. Right at that moment, Wali walks up to me with a T-shirt that said, Alhamdulillah. And I had said, you know, it is all the love. Alhamdulillah. So in this first moment of meeting and melting into Sam, him into me, this path is all about the heart. and feeling the heart, not talking about it, not imagining it. And I had had this background since I was young, this thing called Dzogchen, where you don't really, you're melting, you're resting in an experience. You're not doing mantras and breathing practices. And it was one of the first things I spoke to Sam about, not doing anything to the heart, just letting the beloved love you, letting the beloved move your feet. And in that moment too, I remember I did say something as I left. I said, "It's time." I don't know where that came from. But I felt it was right on the threshold of he started to give pledges.
Bayat, yeah.
Bayat to lots of hippies. Alice? Or somebody named
I
Alice?
think so, yeah.
It's also kind of
But
like
some
a
of those
secretary.
early people disappeared, and then others came, yeah.
But this path is all about heart. And we talked about one of the things that Sam had this pile of documents, tons of papers he'd been receiving, pouring in from different places. And, it was kind of like, well, did I want to help do something like that? I was like, no, thanks. But
I got that job.
Thank you. But we talked about some language, and we talked a lot about how, without coming from any kind of separation or judgment, just seeing things as they are, there was a lot of attraction to people's personalities. Alan Watts, Lama Anagarika Govinda came, I remember.
Yeah.
People were very magnetically personable, but like a candle flame, all bright and shiny on the outside and kind of hollow inside. Not much realization, not much real experience happening. So refreshing to be seen and see, feel and be felt by Sam. Just felt totally loved, like this. And I can't speak to what. I mean, maybe we'll talk another time.
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Okay.
For how long did you know Sam?
Well, I decided not to go on my airplane flight back to Minneapolis. And I stayed till August, my birthday. I left on my birthday. And as I say, it's not easy for me to remember, but I seem to remember there was an open house or something like that the day before I left, where it was sort of something officially happening, making the mentor garden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think I was there.
Yeah.
I'm like you.
I remember some Thursday night Zikr classes and
Yeah.
Saturday dancing, but I really, not dancing, the walking that you were talking about, but I really was still very, the gift that Sam, the gift that happened from the beloved through Sam for me was like, come out and play. He was very young. Do you know what young means? He was very, and I was like very kind of shy. So he had that dance. You told a story of him meeting Hazrat, and him shouting at him, to like, wake him up kind of. That happened a little bit with me, but still happening. I'm still just 40 years later beginning to kind of come out and peak a little bit. It was really wonderful to come to the Northwest Sufi camp in Pomplin Grove. And then I came back in the summer of 1968, and things had really changed.
Because the dancers had come.
It was like this whole explosion of activity, and there again, I was only a short time, but some activity in Golden Gate Park that sometimes I'd sit on the side, sometimes I'd participate. So some of it was very kind of private, like just my inner experience with Sam. And there really is a plan. It's like this grand plan. And Sam played a really integral part in that. Here we are. And, if you just turn for a moment and look in each other's eyes, that's Sam. It's there. He isn't. Yesterday, I don't know why we were at the dances and people didn't seem to buy into wanting to sing him happy birthday. I sang happy birthday to him.
We sang happy.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Do you want to ask me something else?
Yeah. Sam had to decide whether he was going to manifest as a Sufi teacher or a Buddhist teacher, and he chose Sufism because I think he wanted us. He knew we'd love one another, and he wasn't sure he could get us there, through teaching about the void, and.
When I met Sam, I remember one of the things he showed me. He'd just gotten this scroll of, like, you're a Zen Shi, you know. And
from Dr. Sho in Korea, who you met, and that was my question,
Buddhists, humbly, are kind of in their heads. We practice Dzogchen, it's openness and spaciousness. Like outside now, there's not a cloud in the sky. But in our head. Sam, I wouldn't say that Sam was a Sufi or a Zen teacher. I would say he's a heart teacher. Heart really is this path. And, to me, it's like there's one chakra. It's just a heart chakra. These are all facilities, of the heart. There's the main thing that Sam and I both resonated on, besides this kind of universal view, where it was moving beyond it being about us. It's kind of a very deep thing, but a lot of our meditation practice and stuff, it's like all about me, my relationship with God, blah, blah, blah. It's never been about us.
Never been what?
It's never been about us. It's completely about what the beloved is doing. It's that shifting. And in that shifting, it being about not just one of us, like one particle in you, but everyone, everywhere. Everything, everywhere. Becoming a part of that love again. So I'd say integration was Sam's biggest gift. It's one thing to melt, even coming back to Sufi dancing again, dances of universal peace, excuse me. It's one thing to melt into effacement. It's another to be melting and moving your feet. And not bumping into the person in front of you, and learning when to cling the symbols properly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's really what he wanted to bring, is to bring it right into
Yeah.
movement, right into activity, and into an activity that, I mean, it's so easy to feel connected with people when you're dancing together. So much easier than if you're just sitting in an auditorium together, because you have that music and that rhythm and the movement is going through everyone at the same time. And I think that was just, the genius in the form that was offered.
Absolutely.
But yeah, go ahead.
Because I had, I wasn't actually wearing my robes. I was wearing a kurta and a dhoti and this little 15-year-old kid. But I'd had this kind of Buddhist manifestation. But really, it's like what Wali said. Sometimes we wear what's needed the most. And we all have missions. So part of my mission is, you've all heard of mindfulness. Heartfulness. Enlivenment. Feeling the heart. Like today, we were feeling the heart. So many of you, your hearts are very beautiful, opening toward the front and up, but not so much toward the back, not so much down, every direction radiating. So, yeah, heartfulness, feeling, and very grateful. In 2003, I met this wonderful teacher from Indonesia, teaching something called open heart meditation, which maybe I'll get to share with some of you. And I'm so grateful to have met Sam and to have known him through you. He's here through you. This is his larger self, his true self. Everyone, everywhere.
That is so true. And you know what?
And I renewed my vows. I said, like my marriage vows, or that pledge with Wali. Remember, at Northwest Sufi camp, I said, well, when do you want to do it? I said, well, right now. And there's a lot of language I don't remember or know, or if I don't say the right words, but one of the manifestations of this path, the Zerat, I feel really blessed that Mujahideen gave me the Mujahid,
yeah.
Mujahid.
Same root, yeah.
Please forgive me. Under these enormous redwood trees, and to me, the Zerat it isn't just about agriculture or something like that. It really is about the kingdom of heaven on earth, earth in the kingdom of heaven, integration, right here, right now.
Well, thank you. I want to just add one thing to what you said. Sam did come in awakened. His mother had a dream of the prophet Samuel, very strongly a vision, and that's why she was named Samuel. And his family was wealthy, but he didn't get a cent. Unlike your father, who laid millions on you, which you gave away, he couldn't even be supported to go to college, even though he was brilliant. And he had, because he was just too different from them, and he said they never forgave him for being conceived outside of wedlock.
Well, a similar story, actually. My mother and father were both married before, and my mother was British and actually lived in India from 42 to 47. So when I was little and I started speaking, she had a friend at the University of Minnesota that was a Sanskrit professor. She thought I was speaking Hindi or something. It turned out I was speaking Tibetan. But it's very weird being 32 years old in a little body.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, I had this blessing. I had the opportunity to give Sam some money to go to England.
Oh, that's where it came from.
So I'm very beyond blessed to be able to feel this. I hope you all get the opportunity. It's your birthright. And I'm looking forward to coming out and playing more.
Well, you are so welcome. We're so happy. I was so happy to hear when I met you at Northwest Camp that I was going to see you again in Eugene. So I'm so happy that it was possible for you to come, and also for the Eugene and community around here to know that, you know, you're here and you're a part of our community. And what Lama said to me at the Northwest Camp about our practice, he says, you talked about a Rinpoche that said Buddha was the combination of emptiness and light. And he says, well, what you all have here is this transmission, which is a combination of emptiness, meaning knowledge of that absolute, and love. You know, this is our path, is to have this sense of the transcendent and eternal, and that it is nothing but love, and that it comes through love.
Yeah, you talk about the heart and the mind, but kind of not the distracted mind, you know. It's all bits and pieces, fragmented, some scars. But prajna, heart mind, heart wisdom rising. Thank you all. Love you all.
Thank you so much. I know it wasn't easy to come up here and do this, and I kind of tricked you into doing it, and I'm so happy that you did it. And you know, because now we have a little bit of a record, and I'm trying to put together all these pieces of the oral history.
Yeah, and, you know, maybe I'll share some. The only other. I went for a walk with Sam one time. These beautiful big eucalyptus trees above San Francisco. And Sam was so loud. La ilaha illallahu, you know, just,
Yeah, right.
and I was just, you know, walking along. But he was just completely fearless. Be fearless, you know. Thank you.
Thank you. We are all actors, but God is playing all the parts. You know, that's the thing. I realized that back in before I met Murshid, on my LSD days, you know, and, you know, I just realized walking around and I just saw, you know, God is the face behind all these faces, you know, I mean, and all this, you know, but I had nothing to put it together. I couldn't put it together, you know. I couldn't separate out the ego's confusion and appropriation with what was real, and all of that was you know, why I really needed a teacher. And that's why God came to Sam. He was flat on his back in the hospital. And he said he had food poisoning, but one of his friends told me he had a heart attack. I don't know what was true or not, but what?
He had a mild heart.
Yeah, that's what I know. He said I was flat on my back in the hospital, and God came to me and said, "I make you the spiritual leader of the hippies." That was a surprise to him. He said, "I wasn't in any position to argue." And you know, and then we started getting led to his door, you know, and it was divine mercy that led us to his door. You know, I was led to his door on an LSD trip. You know, I mean, it's quite literally led to his door. But because I had going to be writing my doctoral dissertation in philosophy. I'd done all my other work, orals and everything, on cosmic laughter, the laughter of God, something I also experienced on the LSD trip. But I left graduate school because the psychedelic era was arriving and I wanted to go be a part of it, and nobody there was laughing and I wasn't either. And we all were speculating and they were hoping I knew something and I was hoping they knew something. And so that's when I left, but then I landed in San Francisco and to cut a long story short, I was on an LSD trip and walking in Golden Gate Park, and I ran into a rally of George Wallace for president. And George Wallace had wanted me kicked out of college for being, he said, kick that damn Jew out, because I was the editor of the school newspaper and coming out for integration at the University of Alabama when he was the governor. And so he put pressure on the university to kick me out, but they refused because they didn't want to have a riot there anyway. They were trying to integrate the next year. And so instead they hired policemen from the Birmingham police force that belonged to Bull Connor, if you know any of the story, to be my, to watch me and my friends and to protect me and my friends. Yeah, right. But anyway, to get back to the story, I was walking in Golden Gate Park, and I wasn't quite high enough to go to a George Wallace rally. I hadn't overcome that much dualism, and so I turned in the opposite direction. This is how I was led to Murshid, like a ball on a billiard table, And so I started walking the opposite direction, and I ran into the Hare Krishnas, who I had never met before. And they had a temple up on Stanyan Street, and Swami Bhaktivedanta was the guru. Allen Ginsberg, who was a friend of Sam's, and Sam gave the zikr to, had been instrumental in bringing him over. And in any case, I went up there, and so we're having a love feast. Come, so I said, and that sounded a lot better than a George Wallace rally. So I followed them up to their temple on Stanyan Street, and they were doing all this chanting and feeding people all this really very sugary stuff, food, the prasad, and I was just kind of there floating over it all, just enjoying myself and not really that involved. And there was a face of a person there that I was attracted to. About my age, beautiful red beard. And he was actually a street musician. He played on Haight Street singing, spiritual songs, and with his guitar case out, and that's how he supported himself. And he was a hippie, and he said, I wanted to make a conversation with him. I was still pretty gone. And so, not knowing what to say, I went up to him and I said, I'm writing my dissertation on the laughter of God, and I wonder if you could be of any help. It's sort of like being in a bar and saying, what's your sign? And he looked at me for a second, and he said, of course, I wasn't writing my dissertation. I'd put that aside, but I was just looking for a way to make comments. He says, I think I know somebody that has that quality, but I doubt if he'd be interested in helping you with your dissertation. He'd be more interested in your spiritual awakening. And I thought about that for about a second, and that seemed like a good idea. And so then he wrote down the name Sufi Samuel Lewis. He wrote down his address. He drew me a map to his house, wrote down the bus routes, and the days and times of his meetings, and there was a meeting that night. So I set off in that direction, and of course I got lost. And but I picked up a cab I got a cab, and I landed there, and I walked in late into the meeting and sat down in the doorway, and he shouted at me, "Don't block the doorway!" I always took that as a lot of good advice for my life. Because if you ever get into a position of power where you have, and then, like Jesus said about the Pharisees, who were the chief rabbis of his time, he says they have the keys to the kingdom, they don't use it, and they don't share them with others. And that's what's happened to a lot of the secret teachings. I try not to block doorways, not to stay open in that way. But that very evening, he says, my teacher, Nyogen Senzaki, talked about the 7 forms of laughter. He said, but there's an 8th form of laughter, and if you come when no one's around, I'll show it to you. I mean, so this was, and I could just tell the tenor of his voice, his atmosphere. I knew he was speaking from knowledge. He wasn't speaking from speculation like all these professors that I had intercourse with. And so that was how I got led to Sam.